Welcome to Execution Signals.
Thank you, Dan. The pleasure is all mine, and I look forward to this discussion. And thank you for providing me this opportunity.
So I wanted to start with a question based on an article of yours that I read, which was you once described your role or job in the business as generating wow. And I loved the idea of that, but I wanted to delve into what you meant by generating wow, and also what you feel you've helped and where you feel you've helped turn wow into something real.
Yeah, thank you. I think your question took me a little while back. All
Yeah.
those memories are coming to me. Yes, and it has a very specific context when I said that my job was to create wow. Because being in a supply chain technical, usually team feels that they are supporting from back end, right? And they subconsciously just think that they are just an enablers and they cannot take a lead. But in fact, sometimes what they forget is that they are very close to different realities, because their job is like that they are in constant touch with the floor. They're talking to multiple function. They know the problems, and since they are out in the deep, in their back of their mind, they also know the solutions, right? If they can just connect the dots. So the creating wow was a when I was operating in those markets which were always resource constrained, low margin, price sensitive, but high growth. You need something to do with limited resources. There's always a challenge out there, right? The challenge were multifold. We had a challenge of uniform electricity. There were a lot of brownouts, and the products that we have always required cooling, right? So how do you solve it? A, you can feel frustrated that we don't have any solution. B, you can think something different. Look out where the things are moving. How can you bring those fundamentals in? And when you start thinking in that way, I think your creative stimulus starts. Then you don't see those as obstacles. You then start seeing those challenge as opportunities, a kind of a competitive advantage, and then you suddenly come with those ideas. And one of the ideas that clicked at that point of time was all about bringing eutectic into a chilling solution. And eutectic was not a new technology. It was there for so long, not very costly. It's only marrying the two technology at the right way and thinking about it, right? Forcing yourself to think. And suddenly you have a solution, and then the customers see, wow, we never thought about that, right? So it's how you bring those things onto the table, which is always there, but people are not seeing it, because I
Yeah.
think long ago they have stopped asking the question, because for them it became obvious. But it's not true, because things evolve always, the technologies are evolving. So that was the premise actually. And
Yeah.
then there were many other things that happened during those time, and I can dwell deep in more of those as required.
And if we move now on to the word that is on the tip of everyone's lips, every global leader, every organization, which is transformation. And whether that's across digital, AI, sustainability, most organizations are going through some form of transformation. But one thing I've really wanted to do and delve into with global leaders on execution signals is the realities of transformation. Some businesses seem to get it right and it seems to flow, and some businesses seem to stall. So from your point of view, and I know we've delved into this before, where do you feel that some businesses get transformation right, and what is the key to that? And where do some businesses start to stall?
I think that's a very, very pertinent question, because transformation is the need of the hour today. The
Yeah.
technologies are, coming in faster ways, much faster than before. So transformation is required, because each companies would want to harvest those. But let's understand first what transformation actually means, and it means different things to different people. So from my perspective, to me, Transformation is all about when the change gets absorbed by the system. What does that mean is when whatever you're trying to transform gets embedded into the day-to-day decisions. That's when the transformation takes place. Everything before that, to me, is a good intent, or you can say it's a strategy. And I've seen transformations not fail because the intent or a strategy is wrong. They are never wrong, right? But they fail somewhere between what I call is a strategy and an operating reality. That's where most of the transformation they fail. So with that in premise, uh, if you think about transformation from a different lens, because transformation, as I said, would need to percolate down, and that's not an easy work. It requires a very high uplifting, and that's what I call it. It requires a leadership work which is underneath it, which is to drive thousands of operating decisions across hundreds and thousands of sites through people which they don't interact on a day-to-day basis, but still needing them to take those decisions continuously in the same direction. Now that's where transformation actually lives or dies. For the one where it gets stalls, I think the transformation remains at a layer which is above the system. You can call that layer as a program office, a narrative building, or you can call it as a great dashboard. But the system underneath is not touched. It's operating as before. So the transformation never happened.
Yeah.
Now, where it lasts is where the leaders have done that hard work of ensuring it's trickling down to the last person on the floor. In the same way, it should not send different signals. Transformation definitely has to have a narrative, but that narrative to remain same and landing to the last person which matters is important. So it lasts only where it percolates down and it becomes a muscle memory. If it is not becoming a muscle memory, then the old system will take over soon. So that's one major difference where it lasts and where it doesn't. I think the second thing is all about, which I think is even more important, is all about leadership craft of the gray spaces. Now let me unbundle this. Every transformation will see a valley, multiple valleys in fact, right? The early pilots will fail. uh, the business case in month 6 is no longer looking what you thought earlier, right? And that's the time when this leadership craft is very important, because that's the time it's chaos. It's a lot of ambiguity, and the leaders have to come forward, and the organizations which have the leaders which can hold the direction, hold the conviction without holding to be right, because transformation is a journey, right? It's one step forward, sometimes two step back. You don't have to hold yourself to be right always, but you need to hold the conviction of the direction and let the route adjust itself a little bit, making sure that you're still percolating the same narrative so that people see a light in that haze and they believe in that change that is coming. And then they start imbibing that and start building their muscle memory. So that's one aspect of the leadership craft of gray spaces. The second aspect is all about transformations usually is not one function dependent. Usually when we talk about transformation, you always connect with the culture and the capability. And usually you pick big things to transform. It has to have multifunctional aspects. And then when the thing is happening multifunctional, the leadership craft is to make sure they own the gray spaces in between. Because a lot of ambiguity gets created there. and things keep dropping. And then there are minor things. So these are two big things, but there are minor things like transformation needs to, as I said, we worked on the big workflows. That's important. Uh, Nowadays, AI is a trend, and you would know many organizations in many functions, they just start doing something on AI just to be seen as contributing to the new technology. That to me is a confetti. An organization, kind of imbibing that approach, the transform, they should not call that as a transformation. It's like
Yeah.
you're just fueling a confetti where the two things are not even talking to each other, and you're
Yeah.
basically running down the system. So if we have to summarize, I think strategy is important because it can give you the right to initiate,
Yeah.
right? But what is more important is the leadership work underneath, because that will determine whether that transformation or strategy scales. And the most important is the leadership craft of the gray spaces, because that will determine whether it can sustain or live long enough to compound. Because only
Yeah.
when it compound, it can generate enterprise value.
Yeah.
Everything before that is good intent.
And
Enterprises needs enterprise value, right? So that's how I will put it.
very, very well put. And I think you've articulated that extremely well. I think from what I hear, which echoes what you say, when it comes to transformation, whether that is AI or any other transformation for that matter, it's the alignment between multiple functions. And one thing that we've discussed from the forefront of our first conversation has been taking that idea from kind of board level strategy where everything, heavily invested, they want to see a return on investment, that then becoming execution on the shop floor across some organizations similar to the one that you spent your career in, across global markets, multiple cultures, legacy systems. All of a sudden that's a much more complex problem if, like you said, it's not being architected down to the people on the shop floor and repeated. And it's that narrative that keeps, that will ultimately leave a legacy in the organization instead of it being like you said, a good intention.
Good.
And I think that leads us nicely on to AI, because it is, I don't think I've spoken to a single operator within both mid kind of privately owned organizations to some of the biggest businesses in the world that aren't still trying to figure out how it works, and not how it works, but how it fits into their business, because every business is different in the systems that they use, the culture that they have, the legacy systems that they then have to work around. If you look at AI within supply chain today or across operations, end-to-end enterprise operations, where do you see it currently creating real enterprise value if set up correctly in the organization?
It's a big question, Dan, because because to me, AI is not one technology, and it's not at one stage. We have to segment it.
Yeah.
If we see the whole, let me start by saying that I see a balanced scorecard, first of all, on AI. And AI is coming in multiple waves. The earlier wave we all would recall, we used to call it predictive, right? Machine learning. It's been there since a decade or even more in different forms and avatars. Has that generated value? Of course, it has generated value. Any organization with a digital footprint would be utilizing it now, be it for predicting failures, optimizing routes, analyzing demand, and you name it, right? There would be a use case. They may be or may not be calling it an AI because it's embedded somewhere. right? So that part I think has landed, and it's generating lot of use cases, not only use cases but value. You see the reports of different companies, people will be talking of millions of dollars saved because of route optimization and many other things. Now the next wave that came and kind of hit all of us was generative AI. Been there for I think 4 or 5 years. Now tech companies might say no, it's been there a little longer because they must be closer to it. But normal people like us, 4 or 5 years, we have been hearing it, and we have been experimenting with it. Now, has it landed? I would say it has done the crossing, but the crossing is still narrow. Now, why do I say it? Because I was reading an article from a very reputed management company who studied around 1,200 plus companies on this particular subject. And what they came out is that less than 10% of it, those companies were generating value at scale. But those values were 1.8 times their revenue, 1.7 times their profit. And those companies were reinvesting that to further augment. So which means the use case is proven.
Yeah.
Now, some companies does it better than other because it's a natural progression, and there will be different reason for that, and we can talk about that as well. And some of them is linked with the transformation thing, which we just spoke about. The third wave is what we call agentic. Knocked at our doors couple of years ago. Has this one landed? Then maybe. There's a very thin crossing. Other than the tech companies, I don't think so. It's landed very well everywhere else. While the signals are very, very encouraging. Because if you see the share of AI pie, the agents have started taking a lot of share in that, and that share is growing. But my proof point comes when companies starts reporting it, right? Because if you see, other than the tech companies, the companies are talking about, they talk about potential. They talk about what programs they're planning to implement, correct? They're not putting the solid dollar numbers which are impacting the P&L right now. So this one, I think, is about to cross. And
Yeah.
we have to remember some things, like any good technology's adoption, starting with an internet. And again, this particular thing remained with me because I listened to somebody in the tech company who gave a very good statistics. Internet took between 10 to 15 years to reach 1 billion users. Smartphone, between 5 to 10. AI is already there, 1 billion, 2 to 3
Yeah.
years. Now, let's not forget that both internet, smartphones are the key enabler for AI adoption, the speeds and everything. And the next wave of transformation will get AI as an enabler. So it's landing. Overall, I would give it a fair bit of, I would say, kudos that it's getting implemented. Yes, some companies are doing it well, not because the technology was a differentiator. They are moving fast, not because they had a good AI model, but I think they prepare the organization well for adoption. That's the differentiator. So
Absolutely. No, I agree. And they are fascinating statistics on the internet and smartphones. You don't see, I think when we look back, we just imagine that all of a sudden they were in our lives. But I still remember the day that we went on with the World Wide Web and everything was www, and all of a sudden Apple and the smartphone is, it's unusual to not have
yes,
an Apple smartphone. And I think what I'm finding with AI, and I'd like your view on this as well, is that I think, unlike the internet or the smartphone, when it comes to operations and what is and has always had been a very heavily human-led business, kind of the end-to-end supply chain that we call it now, was from one point to the next was fully humanized. And I think it's coming so fast that leadership of the future changes, but also the question that seems to be on the lips of a lot of leaders is, what does this mean for future leadership, the future leaders that are, coming out of university, that want to work in operations, that have a view of leading an enterprise organization of the future. In your view, what does it mean for people moving into that junior market, starting their career? If you were to go back to the beginning of your career now, what would you, in an AI-led world, what would you learn? What would your advice be?
So there are two aspects to it. One advice would be from a leaders who would be there at the gates receiving these new graduates, and what their role should be, because that's also very important, and versus what a new individual would be feeling. And I think the new individual feeling is pretty clear to me, because my daughter just graduated and she joined a job, right? And all the new graduates, they are seeing this fast evolving technologies, and most of them are worried actually.
Yeah.
How would their landscape change? They invested a lot of time learning this particular thing, and suddenly they're seeing disruption in their field. Correct? They are really, really very, very anxious. What would it mean to their job, their skills? Now, this is the exact point where the leadership who are welcoming those graduates will matter a lot. Because in the time to come, the half life of certainty will continue to collapse. New waves will keep hitting them on technologies, on disruption, including geopolitical. The scenarios will keep changing. Skill set will keep evolving. AI and technology will keep becoming more and more stronger, more mature. What would it mean? They would start doing the work more which an executive is supposed to do. And I'm going back to my old days. We were
Yeah.
supposed to do what? Bring analysis onto the table, to their bosses. Oh, I've studied this. Here is what this means. Here is the analysis. Here is the report. I've spoken to everybody across the world and I've compiled this report for you. Do you think that's required now? AI is going to do almost everything of that. Analyzing, pre-reporting, post-reporting, even giving you suggestions.
Yeah.
Now, is it a good thing? And I tell my daughter, it's a good thing actually, because those new leaders then would get the required time and focus time to elevate their work, to do something much better, to do something more meaningful. Dan, go back your time 10 years ago. Some of these work that I told you about analysis used to also frustrate me. I'm an engineer coming out of the college, I'm supposed to do this, I'm supposed to create wow, and here am I sitting doing an analysis. Correct? Now, think that way. So all those work which used to be like mundane, you may not want to do it day in and day out. AI should take it over, and take it over fast, because then you get elevated, and for that elevation you need some capabilities. Now that's the capabilities the new generation should be thinking of now. When we were taking decision, we had a luxury to say, I'm taking decision based on this information, and some of that information used to be dated as back as 1 year. Visualize the presentation the marketing team would make you, and they will give you a number which was a study created on a consumer beverage landscape which is 2 years old, and they're trying to present something and trying to get a decision out of a leadership team on that data. Now that luxury is gone. You will have a lot of data, very current data on your hand, so you will have problem of plenty. The machine can give you all the analysis, but you will still have to take the decision. And that's very important. That's what I call a judgmental capability is required, because those decisions will be very different based on different scenarios, based on different markets. AI will not be able to make that particular thing. That's where your value will come in. You will also have to take the decision on how much you should empower AI to take decision on your behalf. That's another decision you have to take. And then what happens when it goes wrong? Who takes the accountability? The leaders can definitely delegate, the next leaders can definitely delegate analysis, but they cannot delegate accountability. So judgment and accountability will have to be there. And the second thing which I would definitely tell the leaders of tomorrow would be ready to come out of your silos. And that's the point we just discussed on transformation. That's going to become very, very important. Because when we were growing up, right from our school days, we used to be, okay, can you become a champion of this subject? Can you take this particular field in engineering? Then you go and join a particular function and you develop your capabilities in silos. The future generation, I think the silos will have to be broken. Because the enterprise value will be created in the gray spaces, at the seams in between the functions. A functional excellence can only optimize a part. It cannot optimize the system. You need a more enterprise level thinking, and the technologies now that are in your hand, you can learn anything. Correct. So why constrain yourself in a function? You are as good as a marketeer if you are a supply chain guy. And a marketeer is as good as a supply chain. They have at their disposal all the technologies at the press of button. Yeah. You don't have to be functional again. So all this is very important.
No, I love what you've just said there, and it actually brings together two very key themes that I was going to discuss, but that I've been looking into as well. Is it seems to be a common theme from global leaders that say now the leaders of the future have to be, or anyone who wants to be able to be sitting at CSCO, COO level, true enterprise C-suite level, will need to have true end-to-end expertise, and that will be across multiple functions. And one of the questions that I would always put back is, because it kind of goes back to, and I don't know if this is a kind of more of a typically English term, but jack of all trades, master of none type mindset, which I think it was always the view that you had to become, like you said, a master of, you were a master of manufacturing, or it was CI, or it was supply chain, and everything was siloed. And eventually it may come together at a peak in their career, maybe at VP level, maybe at SVP level, and then finally you can step up. But it seems to be leaders of the future need to be able to manage across that gray space, like you said. But I believe what you're saying, and I think is really key, is AI and technology can ultimately be an enabler of that, because it takes away the roles and parts of the business or parts that you don't really need to do, that's taking you away from becoming a subject matter expert in engineering or other facts. And also the rate at which we can, if utilized right, learn these new trades. So then we can start to nurture true end-to-end leaders much earlier in their career. Which interestingly takes me on to another point and thing that we've been seeing across numerous businesses, which is a lot more operational leaders taking the role of CEO of organizations. Now, it's not widespread, but it was historically a finance role that moved into CEO level, but we are seeing more of this happening. I'd like to get your view on it. From what I've heard, it's because we are seeing more enterprise leaders that have a true end-to-end view of everything going on within the organization. They understand operations better than ever. They do understand finance, and they understand all aspects. But I'd like to understand your view on what you're seeing and if that is the case.
No, definitely that's the case, because it gels everything, right? As you said, you need to be much beyond your functional, and the months and the sooner you start demonstrating that, because you'll have to all remember one thing: the value will always get created at the seams. Yes, you can have multiple patents, multiple PhDs, but if that does not get executed, you don't bring the value out of that. And that is why that particular skill is very important, where you need to be more orchestrator at a particular level rather than only a functional level expert. Think about even supply chain. It's a domain, right? They're all operating people. But see how the role is changing. Because in today's world, it's all about ambiguity and uncertainty. And
Yeah.
uncertainty can come from anywhere. In operations, it always lands as a physical thing or a physical problem. What does that mean? Maybe one of your key transport lanes stops. A border suddenly closes. A new regulations land up. Now, these are not scenarios in a slide. These are your products not moving today. Your consumers, your customers not getting service today. Right? These are all big ambiguities, and think how even one function can address it. You won't be able to address it as a function. You need an end-to-end orchestration on this one, and that is very, very important. uh, Supply chain leaders, I would say, and the operational leaders, they don't theorize about uncertainty. They actually live in it. It's their crucible. And I think it's that crucible that builds a lot of their muscle memories and do a lot of shaping up. Most of the operations leader will understand the big picture first, and where all this ambiguity is going to impact and at what stages. Because whenever an ambiguity or an uncertainty arises, it's very important for a leader to create clarity but does not claim certainty. Because as I was saying, half-life of certainty is collapsing. So in a situation which is uncertain, the leader's role is not to know the perfect answer. The leader's role is to provide a frame in the fog. This is what we know. This is what we don't know. This is what we need to protect now because it's urgent. And these are the decisions which we can take today, tomorrow, or day after. And I've seen teams remaining calm in genuine chaos, not because the operations or a supply chain leader had the answers, but the leader had the frame. It's very, very important.
No.
The second thing which the crucibles teaches them is to decide at the speed of disruption, because they have been living in disruption. They get used to deciding at the speed of disruption, completely comfortable with whatever information they have, because their muscle memories have trained them to hold the direction with conviction, but be very flexible on the path. That's the another thing, right?
Yep.
And that's why the organizations which have such leaders actually generates a lot of values in disruption, because a good decision taken today with whatever information is available is much better than a perfect decision taken on Friday. Because believe me, by Friday, those options are gone. There's so much change, ambiguity is there. And the second muscle that these leaders build is that they are perfectly comfortable to adjust, and they kind of percolate this entire atmosphere, making people comfortable to pivot. If the organizations uh, think and they start seeing changing direction as an admission of failure, that organization continue to support bad decisions long after they became irrelevant also. But a genuine operation and a supply chain leader would know these are reality, right? Yeah, it's okay to pivot, hold the direction firm. The third thing, which is, I think, even more important, which the crucibles help them build, is they realize a perfect value, and which is how to leverage disruption to do some permanent upgrade. Every disruptions will expose organizations' weaknesses or opportunities, if you want to call them. Because each organization has some opportunities. Now, this sudden disruption will suddenly expose that. Organizations which land up better have those operations leader, which in the middle of the fire is not hesitant to ask the question, what are we learning from it, rather than just focusing on getting through it, right? Those are the organizations that actually come much stronger in a disruption because they learn something, and it comes from your supply chain and an ops leader. They bring those things because it's their crucible, right?
Yeah.
So if I have to summarize, I think what's landing in their favor is they are adept in creating clarity
Yeah.
without claiming certainty. That's very important.
Yeah.
Give the frame to the team, but don't pretend false certainty.
Yeah.
And the team will be very, very happy, and they will just rally behind you. The second thing is how to decide fast and change course shamelessly, keeping a direction firm, right? That's another thing that the supply chain and the ops leader learn. And the third and the last thing is make a permanent upgrade in every disruption, because then you bring your organization to the next level, and that's what people will remember. And there's no wonder means why boards and other are now recognizing these things from operations leader.
Yeah.
Because it's bound to happen. They now know machine is the moat, right?
It's so true, because I think now it seems to make so much sense now, but I think for so many years, supply chain was just seen as a cost function separate to leadership boards. It wasn't a growth engine for the business. And what has seemed to have changed, and I actually had a fascinating conversation a couple of days ago around, and this has covered a few of the factors that we've already covered in this podcast, but around how a business can't be too siloed with its functions if you have true enterprise leaders and manage through the gray space. But it actually ties in how an enterprise is, or probably should be, structured for success when it comes to transformation, and particularly digital and AI transformation. And the conversation was around how if the board doesn't have somebody who sits at the kind of pinnacle, and that's either as a CEO that's on board with it and understands in-depth enterprise operations, or a COO, and it's not, again, fragmented between a CSCO, a COO, a CEO, somebody who sits that understands how that trickles down and how all the functions work together as an enterprise and sit together. When it comes to layering on top something as complex, or that comes with the level of fear that and uncertainty that something like AI does, that if you have that leader, that enterprise leader, either sitting as the CEO or a COO that encompasses traditional supply chain along with enterprise, that they are the businesses that will grow. They'll navigate transformation much easier. It won't be without hiccups, but it will flow a lot easier than businesses that have supply chain siloed into
Yeah.
planning, logistics, supply chain. Then you've got operate. There needs to be somebody that sits in a role that has enough power, well, not power, but enough gravitas to change the direction of the business.
Okay.
So
I would, and I've worked in my supply chain career most of the time, right? You won't believe it. Sometimes I used to feel supply chain is like a plumbing of the organization,
yeah,
completely invisible when it's performing, correct? And
yeah,
it becomes so urgent when it breaks. But I think now the paradigm is shifting because the world is asking for things, the future world is asking things which is not going to be delivered without this end-to-end knowledge of a supply chain and an operation guy. So that's what is also making a lot of difference.
absolutely. And looking at your career, and one of the topics that we discussed in depth was one of the roles that you spent over 5 years, which was integrating sustainability into a global network. I think one of your visions for the future and visions for kind of businesses to be and lead successfully embedded sustainability is that it isn't a function that works outside. Again, it's something that's brought in as a cost function for the business. So in the 5 years that you spent primarily within sustainability and your view on it now globally, do you feel that sustainability is still moving with the same pace, or is it starting to lose momentum? What are your thoughts?
I would have a very, I would say, clear thought on this, and again, a very
Yeah,
balanced one, because I'm a firm believer, as you said, sustainability cannot be seen as a silo. It's on everything that not only an enterprise but a person does on an everyday basis. It needs to be, and it is getting integrated into that. Again, coming back to the transformation piece, where it only happens when it percolates down and becomes muscle memory. I think sustainability I will put into that space. Many organizations, they do stuff which is driving resource efficiency, which is driving a reduction in their emissions, in which they are using lesser amount of electricity. But sometimes they don't claim it as sustainability, right? But they're doing it. All your operational excellence is done like that. And that is what in the years of role that I had on sustainability, my main goal was to integrate it with the business so that it comes by your natural self. Make it integrated into the design. It should become sustainability by design for whatever you do. And the outcome will be then manifesting in enterprise value. Now, you can take multiple examples. You can embed sustainability into supply chain. When you think about long-term infrastructure planning, sustainability can play a big role. Depending on what your resources are, where do you want to keep your new capacities, if you're going to keep them near your main sources of supply, it's going to save a lot of stuff. And all those are sustainability stuff, right? It's going to save you fuel, it's going to save you transportation, it's going to save you cost. So it's also driving value. So sustainability, again, in summary, has never meant to be standing alone.
yeah,
Sustainability is meant to be in everything that you do because that's foundational. And many companies are realizing it. That's why if you see the mission and the vision of many companies, they will embed sustainability as a foundational element because it helps those organizations to be always innovating, always bringing transformation in how they do their operations. It make them that additional push. It provides them that additional lever to drive operational efficiencies. So that's what I would say, sustainability.
no, absolutely. And really, when you look at things through this lens and quite clearly, it doesn't seem to make much sense that it ever sat as a separate function. Yes, to have somebody leading the agenda makes sense. But I think having it as integrated as part of your operational excellence program, that it is part of everything you do. Do you think more organizations, or it became more siloed because of the need for sustainability became greater? So as businesses grew more demand on not only the planet, on organizations, do you feel it became more siloed as businesses tried to make more of a, express it more to the market that we are big on sustainability, so we've developed a sustainability function? Do you think that played a part?
I think it can be viewed as a different way. Now, to amplify something, when you want to embed something in your muscle memory, it's going back to our transformation discussion. It needs to be provided a context. That context needs to be amplified. That context needs to be repeated till the time it becomes adapted into your day-to-day decisions and becomes a muscle memory. So there was a time when the organizations were exactly doing that, amplifying it. Now some of the organizations adopted a route of amplifying it by keeping it little separate so that it can be provided more specific focus, bringing the other function into it as well. So when you keep something separate, you declare to the world that this is a very prime importance for us, and all the functions are supporting this particular initiative, and that's how it's getting percolated down. That's a way to achieve the end result, right? But it can be different for different organizations. Some organization would do it having integration right from the beginning at the grassroots level, but amplifying it in all their routines. So when they are having any discussions on their production planning, they will think about route optimization and stuff like that. So sustainability becomes by default into their muscle memory, and you don't talk it separately, because the longer you talk it separately, it's not going to land. Like I always say, a transformation that you feel the need of selling it again and again internally will never take place. So it has to get embedded, and that's the approach. The approaches can be different. So a wave may come where to provide an additional focus. Yes, it's kept separately, and now it's getting embedded as people are seeing more and more getting ingrained into your day-to-day discussions. And once it becomes muscle memory, you don't even have to talk about it. It's there. Everybody's talking about it. They're not going to only talk about saving resources. They will talk about circularity. They will talk about regeneration. They will talk about regenerative resources, right? And I'm not surprised, because when I was talking to different functions, they used to always bring these discussions with me. Like if you talk to a procurement function, they will always talk about we should focus around sustainable sourcing. Couple of our ingredients might require water. So how do we bring in supplier partners to drive some of the water replenishment initiative? So it's getting percolated, and it got percolated. So that's how the way it should be done.
No, absolutely. And I think it probably follows in the same vein as AI, and making sure that everyone from the ground up understands that it's part of your operational excellence plan. But also because I think there's always a piece around when it comes to sourcing sustainably, and I think if it's not integrated as a model within the entire business about how do we make everything we do sustainable, it then becomes how do we make it commercially relevant, because it's going to cost more to sustainably source products. But if we are looking at the whole operational excellence plan, we are already taking the cost out by making everything that we do more sustainable from the ground up, and it can be invested in a circle of sustainability, if you will. No, that makes sense. And so I suppose as well, the wave of AI, in your view, AI, when it comes to analysis, comes to cost saving and looking across global businesses, and when it comes to sustainability, I assume AI can make a real difference when it comes to sustainability as well. It's a big...
Yes, it can make huge difference, actually.
Yeah.
Because when you talk about sustainability, it cuts through the chain, right? the scope is massive. If you just talk about emissions, it's the scope 3 emissions are huge data sets. Even scope 1 and scope 2 of the company is sometimes very, very huge. So you're dealing with huge data sets. Imagine a global organization which operates in almost 200 plus countries, would have a huge amount of setup, not only in manufacturing, but also in distribution, and then supplier partners all over the world. Imagine the amount of data that needs to be generated just to make a foundational baseline. AI there can play a major role, and it is playing a major role. It's not only kind of doing the analysis of what you are today, but it can throw up scenario at what needs to be done tomorrow or day after, and which scenario would be better in which market to drive maximum value out of it. And then you bring everybody together, and it's actually doing wonder. And I can tell you a time when people get a little worried seeing the scope of scope 3. But when you cut the big elephant into small pieces and leverage technologies, there are tools available outside which you can make use of, getting a lot of information from your supplier partners, a lot of information from your own system, and then marrying those information at one place, and all done through this AI, and all the analysis done through that, and then churn back a lot of meaningful analysis. And it's earlier it was not possible, I would say, doing on your own. And I've done using an Excel sheet also, versus using an AI. A huge difference has come. So the technology is making a lot of difference, and we should be grateful for that, and we should look forward to imbibe those.
I love your view on it, because there is a lot of fear around what AI and technology, and there's always been a fear around what technology means for people's roles. But I think your view on utilizing AI in its current form and progressive forms as a way to really focus on your craft, your skill, to be able to focus on running a more sustainable business, being able to have data that was never possible before. And a conversation I had a couple of months ago was around how valuable it is to have roles within your organization that focus on the data, on critical thinking, analysis, on judgment, which, if anything, is the more human parts of us at the end of the day. So I think it's nice to hear your view on that.
Correct. And organizations should use it, but they should follow the same principle of doing the hard and the unglamorous work first.
Yeah,
If you put AI on a chaos, it's not going to help.
it's true.
Yeah.
And one of the
yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, sorry. One of the things that I heard, a phrase that I liked when it comes to AI or any technology and transformation, was the creating a culture of pull rather than push.
Correct.
So it was ensuring that, and again, this will come down to leadership, but ensuring that they understand what the mission is, what that means for the business, and how it can actually help them progress in their career, rather than the fear that AI ultimately will take your career. It will disrupt, for sure. Technology always does. But I think this, and our conversation, this is where true leaders that can lead through strategy to execution is key. Yes. And I think one of the points that you made is that having those enabler roles, leaders that have operated in both realms, but understand how to translate top level strategy into shop floor execution, is key. Yes. As businesses become more lean, as businesses lean more on AI, that is so key. And that's what I love about the way that you articulate leadership in such a calm and measured way as well. It's really fascinating. I'd like to just move on to innovation and execution, because we see that falls under AI and numerous technologies. But one of the questions I've got is, how do you scale an idea without killing it when it comes to innovation, new products? How do you scale that across a global business?
Again, it takes me back to my days of creating wow, because a lot of innovation, I was working on that. Believe me, innovation and execution, which is consistent,
Yeah.
they work in opposite direction. So the execution which every company wants, which is consistent, it requires a lot of discipline. It requires standards, repeatability, reliability. Innovation, on the other hand, requires freedom within the frame. It requires allowances for trials, for failing, for retrying. So these two are pretty different, right? They're not same. And that's what I think is the main thing which everybody has to first understand. The second aspect of this is, if you think it from pure play, let's say an enterprise perspective, and I'm bringing again a supply chain lens, but it is true for any function. For any core business, you would actually need a supply chain and an operation which is very efficient and resilient. For trying new stuff, you will need something which is very responsive. And these two are different machines, two separate machines. So my learning tells me very simple thing of making a successful combination of innovation and execution, and which is you separate to create, you integrate to scale, but you have to plan the integration from day one. And let's unbundle this. We talked about efficient and responsive. Every enterprise would have a core business. Take any product, correct? That core business is always based on scale. Longer run sizes, if we talk about physical product. Optimized lines, optimized cost, consolidated suppliers. A new thing would require smaller run size. It will require something new, a new program or a new mold. It would require to co-create with your supplier partners, adjust. It would require your distribution to put up some product in a small market somewhere for a month and then report back, correct? So all through the chain or all through the operations, starting from your procurement to your manufacturing, even your governance to distribution, you need a different approach for newbies versus your core. And if you try to push an unproven product through your core machine, the machine will resist it, right? It's designed, it's built to resist it. It's not cultural. That's the operating design.
Yeah.
So for me, the new should get in a separate environment, a separate budget. Their metrics will be different. Some of their metrics would be, what did we learn today versus how much did we ship today? Right? These are two different things. And the core business gets its standards, the routine. Same company, two rhythms. That's to start, right? Because if you don't do this little bit of segmentation, sometime it can create a problem, and we can talk more about that. But this separation has to be, I would say, temporary. A lab which is never reconnecting back will only produce demos and not the business. So When we want to create enterprise value, the crossing over has to be there. So once the analysis, the incubation, the trials are done, it needs to cross over to the core engine or to the core machine. And that's what when I meant you integrate to scale. Because this integration, this crossover is very important. And this is very crucial also because almost all the innovations die here. They don't die at the ideation stage. They don't die at the stage where you're piloting, where somebody is manually feeding the data to see a new AI tool. It dies at the crossover. And that's where I say that it's important to plan the integration from day one. Because when you're crossing over to the new machinery. Along with them comes new people, new teams. And if they are not involved in co-creating or if they are not being kind of taken into consideration, their viewpoints at the time of designing, this can fail and it's bound to fail, right? So that's very important. The crossover is important, but a planned crossover is even more important. Then there are two, three signals that is also very important for this entire innovation and core execution at the same time. And that comes from the leaders. The leaders have to be very careful about it. With respect to innovation, they are bound to having failures. So leaders have to nurture those failures. The first honest failure is not recognized properly. I think it sends a very wrong signal. Then we stop hearing about failures, and most often not, innovation dies of the good news. And the second thing is when the core, when your machine, the constant execution, when it delivers every day, every week, week after week, but the new and the shiny get all the attention and the core feels they are invisible, then again you have an issue. So both are important. To me, I think execution pays for innovation, but innovation ensure your core and your consistent execution remains relevant for long because the disruptions are coming. So if you're not innovating, you may get obsolete. You may have the best of the machinery, very efficient, but you may soon become obsolete. So my role as a leader was to play a part in between the two. Keep telling the new why core is important because sometimes they think course discipline is a bureaucracy, and I have to remind them that's paying for your experiments. And to the core, I have to tell them why the new is important. Because if you don't innovate, you don't want to become obsolete, right? So that's the balance.
Given you've operated across multiple cultures and your previous role was driving the transformation, sustainability, digitalization globally, is around culture. And what I'd really like to understand is what are the key changes that have to be made when you are leading across cultures?
Yes, I think that's very very I think important aspect that goes back and linked to how leaders can drive transformation in global companies which operate across cultures, right? Most of us actually don't realize, uh, but it's our experiences, whether it's professional or personal, and interaction with people who shapes us, provided we are willing to learn from them. So that's very important. So I first of all, when I started taking this assignment, which was like of a global nature, the first thing was to learn from observations and experiences because that teaches you a lot of things. Sometimes The narrative said by different people is meaning the same, but it's landing slightly different. And it's not because they wanted it to land it that way, but it's because how culturally they think it's right to get that delivered, right? So we have to understand the intent behind and not what gets landed in front. That's the important lesson of anything which you really want to uh, you know drop this cultural thing acting as a barrier for any leader. It's really really very important. The second thing which I think taught me, and that again is coming through my experience, is never be shy of asking questions, because sometimes you might not understand. And if it's okay if somebody is saying a certain delivery which is being narrated and you're not getting the right intent out of it, just ask question, because curiosity and asking questions can clear many things. And suddenly you will say, oh, okay, you meant that, okay, I didn't initially understood it like that way, right? And so asking questions and remaining curious is very important when you're operating in a cross cultural environment, because that also sends very important signal. It's sending a signal that as a leader you're willing to learn from them, because the local context is also very important. That's the another signal that you're sending, and you're welcoming it to reciprocate them the same way so that they can also ask questions. It opens a lot of barriers actually. Just one simple thing, curiosity. And where did I learn? It's a funny thing. uh, this shaping of me came very early in my career, in a shop floor, that too in a shop floor. And again, cultural thing. I was operating in India, but cultural thing. Fresh out of the college, engineer, and you land on a shop floor in automobile setup, right? You think that with your drawings and your plans, you have all the right answers. And you go to the shop floor and you were made to realize pretty soon that's not the case. You suddenly realize that the operators and the supervisors know something that's not in the document. And if you really want your plan to be executed, you should be willing to walk the line, ask questions, ready to adjust and adapt, include them. Again, cultural thing. If you think I'm the boss, this is going to happen, and it's not about cross cultural. It's the cultural differences between even how you think versus a different set of people or technicians or somebody who's very important in the chain. So that realization set me that you know the floor sometimes know better than the deck, and a curiosity got permanently instilled into me. The second thing, I think, what culturally is very important is when you're giving a narrative, the narrative can be viewed in a very different way depending on what situation they are in. When I was operating in a very price sensitive market, if I receive something, let's say from a corporate, I would view it from a perspective of whether this is pertinent to my market. Within my limited budget, will it this be done? Is it really required for the consumer? My consumer needs a product which is targeted at a very low cost price. How can I even deliver something which is like $4 per bottle or something like that, right? So the context along with the narrative is very important when you're dealing in a cross cultural setup. And it's worked both ways. So when you're sending a narrative, be prepared to get rewards, but view those rewards from the local context perspective. You should never paint. everybody with the same brush. You would think, I have sent this simple narrative. Why am I hearing 10 people saying same thing, but two saying something different? What's wrong there? Is it cultural? It's not cultural. It's the local context. Maybe they have something which you have not understood. So again, go back, ask question, be curious.
Yeah.
So never, I would say, assume it's cultural, because cultural, I think, is in our mind.
Yeah.
Everyone out there is willing and they want to contribute, but they at the same time also want to be understood.
Yeah.
Correct. And if you unlock that, then I think you will have lot of support in driving your narratives, your intents, your strategies, that can percolate down because you were flexible enough to adapt to the local context. Correct. And I'll give you an
Yeah.
example. Suddenly an example came to my mind. I took this adoption of a foundational digital platform across 5,000 plus sites just to enable AI, because you need to have a common digital platform. Now, how the narrative becomes important, right? Imagine what did we do? We had all the workflows and everything initially only in English. And we were intending to go down to each shop floor to the local operator level. And suddenly we all realized, somebody showed us the mirror. I said, oh, question. Yeah. Then, of course, it was an over. And if you think that is a culture, that's not cultural. You know, somebody did not think about it. It's going somewhere. It needs to be in different local languages. So,
Yeah.
as small thing as that, uh, easily sometimes we label them as cultural. They're not cultural. So, then to me, I think you need to just follow some basic principle of people leadership. Correct. Be willing to answer their questions. Do not dodge their questions, because if you do that, then also you can get a very quiet resistance. And when you are driving something of global scale, quiet resistance can kill some of the greatest projects. So you need to open everybody up.
Yeah.
So a common room where everybody is free to talk and tell what's not working there, what do they think. Everybody has a perspective. Make sure those perspective gets captured. But even more important is when somebody gives you a perspective, culturally, here the cultural thing will come, because you need to get back to them. What did you do about their inputs? Were
Yeah.
they incorporated? If not, why not? Correct? Because
Yeah.
that's an even big trigger. So if you consolidate everything, but if you don't go back and with the right answer, then again there is an issue. There would be a resistance, because they would not understand that was their requirement, right?
I think to round off, because you and I know, could speak for probably 3 to 5 hours, and I don't know how many podcasts we'd guess for podcast listeners we'd get at the 5 hour mark. But I want to close out with a couple of questions around you and your career and you personally. What do you know now, at this point in your career, that you wish you'd have known, let's say 20 years ago when you started?
A lot of things. In fact, everything that I have said, I wished I would have known that, the floor knows better than your drawings, right? I wish I knew initially, very early in my career, that uh, challenges are always to be seen as opportunities. They're not obstacles. It that realization came late, after going through that whole journey and making it as a crucible. Yeah, I wish I had known earlier. I wish I had known earlier that early in the job, I used to think, oh, I need to be the best technical person in the room. I need to know all the technical answers. But the realization came much later that my value is not what I can do, or even for that matter, what my team can do. Because by that point of time, I've seen enough and more that even if the function meets their scorecard, the enterprise can still fail. So, what's the point? Right? So, the true value only comes when the system wins. I wish I had known much, much earlier. Correct? Because then, you don't play in your functional lanes, you play as a team, you create value as a team. And soon as that realization came in, I've just started orchestrating, keeping my head up above the function, seeing the whole, telling the big narrative to the team, and then telling them, okay, this is the big narrative, but here is where you will contribute, and feel proud about that. That's the big picture. We are going to be part of that big journey, which will transform X, Y, and Z. So that from there, that day on, you became an orchestrator. I haven't looked back.
Yeah.
Always seeing that big thing and making that transformation done. I wish I knew many, many things done earlier in my life. See,
That
rear view mirror is always, it gives you a lot of things, So
it really does, and I think you've landed in a really beautiful place with it from a leadership perspective. And one of the questions I was going to ask is, what do you hope is possible because you were in the room? And I don't want to answer it for you, but I would assume that it's that you were able to orchestrate and to show people what is possible and take them on the journey. And I think that's from every conversation we've had over the months we've been talking, this podcast, everything. I've always come off the call feeling enlightened, feeling uplifted. You've got a beautiful, calm way about you, but I love your leadership style, and I think you've created a lot of value for a lot of people, and I think that's one of the key reasons behind wanting to do this podcast with you, because your outlooks on culture, leadership, everything are really refreshing. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking part and being a guest today.
Thank you, Dan. The pleasure is all mine. And thank you for giving me this opportunity.